Hello and welcome back to Philosophy 101. Today we will be looking at a very fascinating aspect of philosophy, namely the philosophy of Duckburg, a place that is well known for its abundance of philosophers with interesting reflections about life and ethics. For this lesson, we won't be going into great depth, but rather provide a small introduction to a few of the most influential ones. To start, we have D.F. Duck, or Donald Fauntleroy Duck, whose philosophy has been immensely popular with the working class and the everyman. As a legal guardian of three and as someone with an impressive amount of life experiences yet no consistent employment, he's been widely regarded as one of the most unique reads out there with his mix of autobiography and sincere reflections. A review of D.F. Duck's first book from Duckburg Times states, "When I read about D. Duck's life, I feel a ton better about my own, because what the fuck? That isn't to say that is the only appeal of his work by far. His work contains countless inspirational thoughts about getting knocked down and getting right back up again to an almost ridiculous extent. There's also a recurring theme of the struggle of the working class that a lot of people have been able to see themselves in over the years. How does one operate under a system, an entire world that appears to be against them, and what critiques and reflections can we derive from that?" Donald Duck never seems to have any direct conclusions to these thoughts, but he points out many important issues that we could all benefit from reading up on when things don't go our way. D.F. Duck didn't achieve much recognition until the later years, but his work was so inspiring that his children also started writing philosophical works, though of a different sort. Huey, Dewey, and Louie Duck mostly wrote works together, often coming up with philosophies that seem childish in nature, such as avoid baths, but upon further examination you will find three highly reflective children with important messages about the world. Students of H.D.L. Duck have claimed that avoid baths is meant to be a metaphor for going against the status quo and finding meaning in our natural state, unaffected by the world around us. We must all avoid baths in the polluted and tainted waters of society and industrialization in favor of living our utmost truths in the liberating mud of ideas. Some of their books are how-to books, such as their famous work, How to Make Sure Your Incompetent Uncles Survive After Biting Off Way More Than They Can Chew, but they also have books about how to live as a child in a confusing world that never quite makes sense when you think about it. Their books are often compared to those of their uncles, some claiming that they work quite well together in the observations, while others point out the differences in tone. H.D.L. Duck seemed to have more of an idea of how to navigate the world fueled by more than just determination. A strange and unique thing is also that a lot of their books include lines like, "This can also be read in the Junior Woodchuck's Guidebook," something that has been interpreted as an almost religious sentiment, as it appears all answers can be found in this guidebook. The Junior Woodchucks refused to give students of philosophy access to this book, and the ones dedicated enough who have joined the Junior Woodchucks to learn more were never seen again. Then there's Scrooge McDuck, the renowned billionaire who's written a lot of books on economic systems and some average billionaire ramblings about how anything is possible if you put your mind to it. It stands in sharp contrast to the works of Donald Duck in a lot of ways, clearly written from a different perspective and with different privileges, but there are a lot of people who have pointed out the similarities in their work ethic. McDuck has also written about wealth, how to live with it and how to protect it, something that numerous times has been interpreted symbolically. He's also famously quoted for saying, "I know that money isn't worth anything, it's just a lot of paper and metal." This advocates the idea that money doesn't buy everything and does not need to be spent to have value. Some students of McDuck have argued that his wealth is more than just material, and that his description of the defenses of his money bin can also be used to reflect on the things that have value to you as an individual, or simply the consequences of reflecting these memories and sentiments onto material objects. McDuck doesn't seem at all critical to the latter, even appearing to encourage the reader to find the material objects that matter in their lives, figure out why they matter, and protect them with all their heart. An important aspect of McDuck is also his number one dime, the first dime he ever earned, which really highlights his more symbolic connection to his wealth, giving the dime its own velvet pillow. He occasionally dismisses the idea that the dime can be considered a lucky dime, finding more value in his hard work than a potentially supernatural source. Someone who does not dismiss the power of luck in the slightest, however, is the almost notorious philosopher Gladstone Gander. Despite being one of the most renowned philosophers, Gladstone Gander never actually wrote anything down. In fact, his first book came to be after Gander was the 100th customer in an antique typewriter store, which led him to win a paper-filled typewriter that he dropped when a lost cat ran into his lap, causing the typewriter to fall on a newly established sidewalk with concrete deficiencies repeatedly, after which the famous agent whose cat had gotten lost saw great potential in the pages that had fallen in a neat little pile on the sidewalk and got him a book deal straight away. A lot of people have criticized Gladstone Gander's work for catering to hedonistic pricks who have never worked a day in their lives, but as someone who has studied his work for a long time, I can say it goes a lot deeper than that. If you examine Gladstone Gander's work closely, you will actually find some very interesting reflections about modern life, consumerism, and the power of envy. A centrally recurring theme is how to find true happiness. This often shows in the form of fictitious debates with a certain Donald, who, according to experts, is unconnected to the famous Donald Duck, where the two are put up against each other in squabbles that often seem to end with things returning to the status quo. This is often interpreted to illustrate the meaninglessness of the duck condition and can lead us to learn more about how we should balance leisure and work. Gladstone Gander also often speaks very highly of a certain Lady Luck, a divine being who he feels can be used as our guide. A clever nod to the unpredictability of fate and how luck is an uncontrollable force regardless of who we are. Things in life are beyond our control, but the best we can do is follow along, and perhaps happiness will be waiting somewhere along the way. Daisy Duck is an important philosopher who has gotten a lot of recognition in recent years for writing works in several branches of philosophy. She's not to be confused with Donald Duck despite having similar initials. With experience in journalism and lots of charity work, Daisy has gotten to know a multitude of people and has gained a lot of personal insight into the world. She's also among the only philosophers in Duckburg with prior writing experience. A lot of her works are cleverly written in the form of diary entries, so the further into the books you get, the less they seem like personal notes, and the more they seem like applicable philosophy. She remarks a lot on the tendency where people feel the need to fill their lives with empty distractions, how people seem to look for anything to give their lives meaning, and how it occasionally leads to a larger societal problem with the treatment of women as possessions or prizes, and how it leads people to hold on to things that from a more utilitarian perspective could be given to those in more dire need of it. She's been compared to all of the philosophers above, often used to critique them. In addition to that, she's also written a variety of self-help books, as well as articles about various media and people where her philosophy shines through clearly. Feathery Duck is another popular philosopher, well known for his eccentric excitement and his motivated writing about impulsivity and living a creative life. Some critics say that his philosophy is all over the place, while dedicated students of his work say the same. While it's often hard to follow, interjected by various unrelated projects, people often declare that reading his books has been an enlightening experience that has given them a clearer view of who they are as people and how to enjoy their lives. No one is really sure if his books were meant to be philosophy, self-help, autobiography, or experimental short stories, but their impact is impossible to ignore nonetheless. Some honorable mentions in the philosophy field are, for instance, the remarkably reflective cookbooks of Elvira Koot Duck, whose entries often include advice on how to be remotely functional. Then there are the books of magic and spells, such as How to Find Your Number One Dime and Steal It If Necessary. Jarrah Gillis' books on the philosophy of freelance inventing and robotics discoveries and ethics that I won't elaborate on in this lesson for legal reasons, and many more. We'll be learning more on our study trip to Duckburg later this semester, but please sign your permission slips on time or we'll have to go to Mouseton again and no one wants that.